Welcome into another edition of the Calling It How I See It Sports Pod. Thanks for joining us live here on Twitter. If you're catching us on the podcast on YouTube and Spotify, remember we do a lot of these recorded live on Twitter now. Every once in a while, we still do a pre-recorded podcast, which you can find on YouTube and Spotify, and I'll put these ones up afterward. But if you ever want to catch us live, join in and chat in the Twitter Spaces chat room. You can look out for my tweets. Follow me at BT Sportsman on here, and it's a great way to get to interact with us a little bit. Well, good buddy Q, Quentin James joins us. It's been a while since we had the original crew that kind of helped me get this off the ground a little bit. Where, back in the pre-recorded days, Quentin joined for our first ever Twitter space with Joshua Briscoe, but we haven't talked Royals in a while. Q, what a crazy series. I mean, like Jack Caglione comes up and, it's already crazy enough. And then, a doubleheader today where basically every pitcher took the mound. I mean, we saw everything this series.
Oh man, Blake, well, it's good to be back with you here on the podcast. What an exciting time it is to be a Royals fan. I mean, we have maybe the most exciting prospect in baseball joining us for this series in St. Louis. True, he hasn't exactly lit the world on fire yet, but just taking a look at some of the swings he's had and his presence at the plate, you can tell he is going to make an impact for this team down the road. Um, just a matter of time, and obviously the rest of the team is taking cues from him, and the bats are heating up, even though he hasn't contributed much.
Yeah, he got his first hit in the first game of the doubleheader today. Today he did whiff a little bit more, struck out 3 times in the second game of the doubleheader, struck out 4 times today. So let's see, after um, the 2 games today, I believe he's going to be sitting at 1 for 13 because he got 5 at bats in the first game on Tuesday. Q, you might be able to actually look that. He looked. I think he got 4 in each of the games because he was pulled for defense, but I think he still got to 4 in both of the 2 games today. So he's going to be 1 for 13 with 4 strikeouts. But, I think more telling was what he did on Tuesday, where, 0 for 5. But in your first major league game, you get 5 plate appearances. You face 2 different lefty specialists. I mean, the Cardinals actually were already making a point of that to bring in lefties to face him. And in Tuesday's game, he had 2 of the 4 hardest hit balls all night across the entire MLB. Didn't strike out once. I mean, when you do things like when you hit the ball like that, eventually just good things are just going to happen, even if only by accident. I mean, the one hit he had was kind of one that we've seen the Royals get burnt on a few times, where they try to hit it up the line, and a lot of times the first baseman will snag it and it'll turn into a double play or something. But, exit velocity does a lot for you in those sorts of situations, huh?
Absolutely. I mean, you hit it that hard, the defender doesn't even have a chance to react. And I'm looking at some StatCast advanced stats here. Obviously, like you said, it's a very small sample size in terms of how many balls he's put into play so far, but he's currently leading the team in average exit velocity on his on his batted balls. So not bad for your first series in the majors.
And like you said, I mean, it kind of seemed to have an effect on the whole rest of the team. Salvi, of course, I don't know if they were talking about it on the radio broadcast. I don't know how much they got into it on the TV broadcast, but after today, he had a couple more RBIs, 2 RBI singles in the second game, and I think he had at least 1 hit. Well, I know he had at least 1 hit in the first game. Salvi now in doubleheader games has a 21-game hitting streak and has the best all-time batting average in doubleheaders, hitting over 380 in doubleheaders. And this was his 44th that he's played in. Now, the guys he's competing with and the guys who have enough doubleheader at bats are, well, first of all, they're Hall of Famers. Babe Ruth is 3rd all time. Now, of course, those guys played a lot more doubleheaders because doubleheaders were pretty standard back in the day.
Right.
But over a full career, I mean, 44 doubleheaders. I mean, he's literally gotten a hit. Now, it's basically half the games is what he's on a streak now of in doubleheader performances. So there's a little statistical anomaly there. But I mean, Uh, do you think it's just a coincidence? Because it seems like one of those things that is just something we say, right? Like things that we can't prove, but that just make good sense, right? Like another example could be like everybody was already weirded out by their kind of lack of plan with Jonathan India, and so then when he struggled to start the season, it was all well, it's because they keep jerking him around defensively. So it's here we wanted the offense to get better so bad. Maybe Caglione comes up and we're saying, oh well, he's gonna have this ripple effect on the team. But I don't know, man. Like it's not just I don't think it's just a pure coincidence because they're already strategizing against him though. I mean, you saw him bring in lefties to face him multiple different times. I think it has had some sort of impact on the Royals and on their opponents, on their one opponent already.
I actually agree with you there. I think there's a psychological effect and a boost to the team's psyche when you bring up a guy like this. They had couple of stats on the broadcast towards the end of today's game. Team stats over this Cardinals series are hitting as a team 364. I think they had at the time 36 hits this series, which is a far cry from the offense that we've been watching for the first couple of months of the season. Um, so I think to your point, there is a psychological impact, and they're excited to have this guy good contributing, and I think it's rubbing off on the rest of the team, at least right now. And a lot of guys are heating up, like you said, Salvi. Too early to bury him. His advanced stats actually look better than his actual stats. I think he has a chance to definitely improve. And a lot of the other guys, Michael Garcia has been on a tear. I mean, he's been one of the best hitters on the team this year. And then Bobby Witt Jr., of course, doing his thing at the plate and in the field. He had a couple of incredible defensive plays in the series, including one tonight where he went basically vertical. That
Yeah.
was maybe one of the best plays I've ever seen a shortstop
His
make.
body was parallel to the ground when he caught the ball, like the kind of like where we've seen Mahomes make a throw that doesn't make any sense when he is basically flying through the air. That Bobby caught a ball like that tonight.
Yeah, yeah. Ryan on the TV broadcast, his first comment was like, "There's Superman," and that's what he looked like.
Did what do you think? Did we see anything good or bad on Caglione in right field today? Back-to-back games in right. He was removed for defense for John Rave both times. I don't think it was because of anything that happened. It seemed like that was something that was pre-planned, and we know Rave is a pretty solid outfield defender.
Yeah.
Caglione, I think, should be at least somewhat of an asset out there, if nothing else, because of his arm strength. Did you? I mean, he caught a few fly balls. Did you notice him in any sort of way, good or bad, defensively?
I didn't notice him one way or another. I don't think he's really been tested out there to this
Yeah, yeah.
point, but it is going to be interesting to see how much they balance having him in the field versus DHing over the coming weeks, especially if he continues to struggle at the plate. Is the thinking maybe you want to take some pressure off and just let him DH? I think that could make some sense. But tonight was a very interesting outfield lineup. You had Garcia playing center, I think, for the first time this year. I can't recall. He's been out there, but
Yeah, I think he might have been in left a time or two, maybe, but I don't know that he's been in
yeah,
center yet. They talked about him in center, and we saw him in center some in the spring. I mean, then we haven't really seen it too much
right.
because they
So
were
I
messing
thought that
around
was
with
an
Indy out
interesting
there and stuff.
choice for having a very inexperienced right fielder and then putting an inexperienced center fielder out there as well. So it made sense that they made that substitution later in the game when we had the lead. But I think it remains to be seen how he's going to fare out in right field going forward. I'd like to see Isbell out there with him more often than not, just for that that presence out there in center.
Well, I mean, if you had told us coming into this series or really any series, the last few weeks. I mean, the Royals gave up 18 runs this series. Or was it? Yeah, 18, 7, 6, and 5. So, I mean, if that's 6 runs a game, if you told us coming into any series this year that a club was going to score 18 runs in a series, I don't think we would have had any confidence that they would win the series, maybe not even win a game. I mean,
Mhm.
uh, why not? I mean, we ought to talk about the pitching a little bit, but my takeaway on the pitching is it's about damn time they got some help. Like obviously you can't be giving up 6 runs a game. Nobody's saying that, but let's. It's about time the offense carries a few games.
Absolutely. I think there are a couple of concerns in this series on the pitching side of things. Lorenzen had another rough outing in the first game, and then, well, Noah Cameron did Noah Cameron things in the first game of today's doubleheader. Just another casual 6 innings, 0 earned runs baseball. I mean, that's just what he does, I guess. And then Reagan's, they mentioned it on the broadcast. He doesn't quite look like himself right now. I don't know if
I'm not
it's
convinced he's fully healthy
lingering
still
effects of the injury or
because his
something beyond that.
velocity and command were off. It's one thing if it's just the command, but when the velocity is also not there and it's coming from his legs, I mean,
Yeah,
it's not a
I mean,
great sign.
you would hope they wouldn't rush him back with the depth that we've shown to
Right.
have in the rotation this year. But
Hey, not to cut you off, but it's an interesting time. We might be having our first potential call in. Maybe we've got somebody. I don't recognize the Twitter handle. It could be somebody I know, and I just don't recognize the Twitter screening. But we've got somebody requesting to speak in here. You think we ought to let a third party join for a minute, see what they got to say?
let's bring him in, craft the
All
party.
right, approve and request. Maybe. There we go.
Don't make us regret it.
All right, I
Well,
think you're
hello
on,
there,
man. What's up?
gentlemen.
How's it going?
It's going good. Actually, no, this is my first time chatting with you fellas, although I did listen into your space, Blake, with the one Jack Johnson.
Well, Jack Johnson. Yep, done a couple with him. We talked about the Caglione call up on Tuesday
That's
or
right.
Monday.
That's
Monday.
I
What's
was
up, man?
tuning in. It's good. I'm feeling good. Here's another thing. Now I've come in late, so you probably already went over this, but so the pitching gives up 18 runs. The Royals scored 23, I believe, is the official tally for this series. But also remember this. It's not like they gave up 18 runs to a middle of the pack to a bottom feeder. This is a Cardinals team that's currently, I believe they're still in possession of the final NL wild card. So, on one hand, yes, the pitching gave up 18 runs. On the other hand, we took them to the woodshed for 23 runs across 3 games in their own stadium.
Absolutely. And honestly, I think uh, y'all might be able to test this more than I can watching it on the TV broadcasts. I was listening to Josh Bringer's postgame show on 96.5 Tuesday night, and there seemed to be some open seats, so a bit of a lack of Cardinals.
I I'll tell you this, Blake. I can't remember seeing Busch Stadium like it's been in this series and likely throughout the year. But I mean, you're seeing like half empty stadiums for evening games against. I know that the Cardinals don't see us as their primary rival, but this is still a series between two teams who are battling for playoff positioning.
Guys,
And I certainly saw quite a bit of blue in the stands.
I mean, it's pitiful. And I could understand if your team is terrible like they looked at the beginning of the season. Boy, that was a time when we all thought the Cardinals were officially dead. But they're in a playoff spot, fighting for the playoffs still as we speak. 7 games over 500 or 6 now.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, the Cardinals, honestly, a lot of people expected them to be in somewhat of a rebuild mode coming into this season. And they've kind of Twittered all, which I just follow some folks that went to Mizzou with me and are now reporting on the Cardinals, like Brandon Kiley of 101 ESPN in St. Louis. And, you look at a lot of their tweets and it's it's still what can they get for their pieces. It's still talking about them like they're a seller, but like to your point, they're not playing like one, and the Royals actually split the season series with them.
Yeah.
So,
And sorry.
Go ahead.
Well,
You're good. I was just gonna say, I mean, delve into the pitching a little bit more here. Q, is it Ian? Is that correct? Is that your name? Y'all can both chip in on this if you want. But delving into the pitching a little bit more. Lorenzen, obviously brutal start Tuesday night. Cameron start kind of got wasted today. Reagan's clearly didn't look like he's back to full strength yet. But I have a really hard time criticizing the bullpen for the loss today because they pitch you 3 innings, giving up runs, but also, I guess what you would say limiting the damage. Like after the home run that gave the Cardinals the lead in the bottom of the 8th, they got the next guy to allow the Royals to tie it in the 9th, and then the Royals only push across the ghost runner in the 10th. Scoring run as the road team, scoring 1 run in extra innings is kind of like scoring no runs was before, because you have to essentially account for 1 run in the bottom of the inning. So I have a hard time, especially given the way they pitched today and picking up Reagan's. I still think the bullpen is rock solid. What about y'all?
yeah. I mean, actually, you know what? Actually, I'm gonna go ahead and let Quentin give his take because I got a couple things to say about the bullpen, and it's all glowing. But I want Quentin to give his take first.
Well, thanks, Ian. I'll keep it brief because I think it's pretty simple at this point to say that they're one of the top bullpens in the league. When you have what 5, 6 guys with sub 2 ERAs. I've been critical of Angel Zerpa a bit this year, but I mean he came out and shoved in the evening game today, and after a short start from Reagan's, and really there hasn't been a consistently weak link anywhere to be found in this bullpen, which has made manager Q's job fairly easy in that regard. But uh, yeah, for as much love as the starting rotation has gotten this year, and rightfully so, I think the bullpen deserves just as much credit from top to bottom. Even the guys who coming into the year you weren't expecting much from, like Taylor Clark, starting the year in AAA, and he's got a sub 1 ERA, I believe, in 10+ innings. And
He was the one guy that didn't get hit in the first game, I believe. Isn't that correct?
yeah, I'm looking
Because
at the box
Schreiber had
score
a bit of a
now.
rough. Schreiber had to be bailed
Yeah,
out.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah,
And
you
then
never really know what tribes you're gonna get, and the thing is, I hate saying that because for most of the year, Schreiber has been very dependable. It's just when he's not, he is not.
Yeah, that's true. It's not Jekyll and Hyde with him. Funny thing about Schreiber, this could be researched. I know that the website and the filters exists. It doesn't work so well with my accessibility screen reader, so that's going to be more on y'all to see if you can get this level of detail. But I have this feeling that if you could break down Schreiber's appearances based on like the context he came into, I almost feel like he does better at stranding guys, runners, at like cleaning up somebody else's mess than just throwing his own clean inning.
I
Is that ring true to y'all at all?
that in the most convoluted way that statistics can put it, for some reason it makes sense. And now the other part of that is I've never truly looked into what kind of personality Schreiber has. If he has a, let's say, more aloof and colder personality, he may take a certain joy in stranding runners more than having a clean inning, just because it's a little more. I guess you could call it twisted.
It's a fireman role, kind of like what they were asking Urseg to do before.
Right. Oh, by the way, let's also not forget that the bullpen did this to the Cardinals, and we didn't have Urseg.
What was that? They did it to the Cardinals and what?
The bullpen did this to the Cardinals, and we didn't have our best setup man.
Oh yeah, and with no Urseg, really for the last few games. I mean, what do y'all think? What happens in the bullpen when some guys get back? I'm starting to get worried that Hunter Harvey might not be. There might not be much more left from him this year.
Yeah, they moved him to the
Um,
60-day
I
So,
think,
list today.
I think at
but yeah,
this,
when Ursa gets back and if Harvey gets back, what are we thinking? Because like who do you? I mean, Andrew Hoffman's already been optioned. He stayed for the 20s. He stayed as the 27th man. He didn't actually leave until he won't leave until now, but he was optioned today to make room for Reagan's, and then allowed to stay as the 27th man. I mean, I don't know who else you really want to send out.
yeah, well, you know what? It's a good problem to have because I mean,
No kidding.
look, I am eating all the crow on Zerpa. I wanted him gone before the year. I'm so glad he's turned it around. Taylor Clark. Look, he gave up a home run today, but that's what his first really bad outing in what, like 6, 7 appearance in the however many appearances he's had, and then
That's bowling, right? You kind of cut out there. You talking about Jonathan?
yeah. I mean, I was also talking about Taylor Clark. I mean, he's been, at least in the outings I've seen him in, when they've had to bring him in with that, with that 1 or 2 runs left and the bases are loaded, he's gotten a couple of clutch double plays out of it.
Oh yeah, he got a. Didn't he? I don't know if I can't remember if it was it might have been an extra inning save maybe, or maybe Estevez just wasn't available, but he got a save
Yes,
in the last week, didn't he?
I think
So
so. I think he did. But we were talking about who may come back or what happens.
who'd have to be replaced? Yeah.
Um, yeah, look, it's no real scratch on him, but if you had to pick, it would probably be Bullen. And it's not necessarily because he's been bad. It's just, you can't, it's like they have to say in Moneyball, like we can't have 26 guys in the clubhouse.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and a lot of that stuff just comes down to who has options. It's the curse of having options. Is you're a lot more vulnerable to getting sent back and forth and back and forth. Obviously, are we all on the same page that, especially now that there's been some injuries in the bullpen. Now going into this White Sox series, the bullpen's going to be kind of depleted and kind of tired, you would assume, after all the work they did today and no off day going into Chicago. I mean, combined with Lorenzen's extensive relief experience and just based on performance, I think it's time Noah Cameron gets that rotation spot and we see what Lorenzen can do in the pen.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Blake, you and I and Kyle talked about that in our text chain, but I think I mean there's no way you can keep Cameron out of the rotation at this point. So unless you want to go with 6-man rotation, Lorenzen's got to come out, and that of course also assumed that Reagan's is healthy and they plan to keep him in the rotation as well. But
Right. And we'll
I
get to
mean,
see Lugo's second start too tomorrow, I believe, against isn't that I think I got the rotation lined up right.
I think
Lugo
that's right.
Lugo on the mound tomorrow.
And I mean, you look at the rotation 1 through 5 right now. You could find me a better rotation in baseball 1 through 5 right now. I don't think you can do it.
No. Well, the rotation plus the bullpen. I don't think there's anyone better. And yes, I'm being a bit biased because the Royals are the team we all pay most attention to. But I mean, what other bullpen plus the starting row? What other pitching staff? Yeah, I can't think of one right now.
Yeah,
I
there
mean, you
might
could
be.
maybe argue the Dodgers, right, with
True.
Otani, Yamamoto. I guess Kershaw's still around, but I mean, they've had a lot of injuries. I'm looking at their roster right now. Blake Snell's out, Tyler Glasnow's out.
That's why they signed everybody because they
Yeah,
knew
They
by
signed everybody who gets hurt, and they knew they just have enough healthy guys at once.
yeah.
So,
And there was
funny how that always happens to them.
although fellas, it's not, as we've seen this past week, not just with the White Sox but other bottom feeders around the league, namely one in the National League. The Royals had to go into Chicago with their game faces on because the White Sox just took the series from Detroit. The Rockies swept the Marlins. I know the Marlins are another bad team, but this is the Rockies sweeping a team that shouldn't
That's how you know
happen.
you're bad.
Yeah, that shouldn't happen. So, Royals, fine. Be on your P's and Q's. I don't know who the pitchers are that we're going up against in Chicago, but they're no slouches. And Lugo has to go at least 6, and if he can push it 7, because right now
Yeah,
that bullpen needs a break.
well, and Lugo and Reagan's, neither one of them looked great, frankly, in their first starts back. So there, it is going to be important. Now, luckily, if I have the rotation lined up, or if they didn't do anything funky with the rained out day and trying to move, they've been moving the rotation around a lot, is my point. But it should be Lugo, Waka, Bubich in some order in Chicago. So you feel pretty decent about that. It's just you don't know what Lugo is right now. That kind of leads me, we talked a bit about like the Cameron versus Lorenzen thing, and that could be a way to help lengthen out the bullpen too, is putting Lorenzen out there. I want to kind of go back to something because I want to see if anybody listening. I see we got a few people listening. Chime in the comments here too, because we talked a little bit about just before you hopped on, we talked a little bit about, Caglione looked fine, didn't really get severely tested so far in right field. Like, how big of a fan are we of this process and of having him out there? Because, on one hand, I think it's creative when you have a bit of like a log jam at like that first base DH spot. Salvi needs days off. Vinny can really only play first or DH. But I also have some frustration with it because, sort of like Jonathan India, it's just another thing you're putting on his plate when you're really needing him here for his offense in both cases. And then, I don't know, like there's also some frustration that like the reason they're doing this is because they haven't really been able to develop an outfielder. Like if there's one thing that JD Piccolo still hasn't done, it's actually draft an outfielder with promise. He's only had 2 drafts. I'm not really coming down on him. It's more
Yeah.
just they haven't. They're doing this because of a larger issue, and so there's some. I don't know. I feel some frustration that that's being added to his plate, but I also understand that it's it's a team need. Where are y'all at on that? Because I just don't love it from those perspectives. Plus, if he does turn out to be what we think he is offensively, all putting him in right field does is make him more expensive. He's a lot less expensive as a first baseman, even if everything else is the same. So,
Yeah, I think you make a good point there. And probably the most surprising thing about bringing him up wasn't the fact that we didn't think his bat was ready. Obviously, he tore the cover off the ball all year long. It was the fact that he'd only played 14 games in the outfield in his entire baseball career, basically, between college and the minors. And you're talking about learning the position on the fly after only a year in the minors. That's a pretty tall ask. So I think this is something we could look back on later in the season and maybe question if it was the right time to bring him up. Um, as we see the offense start to heat up around him, we talked about maybe that is the Jack effect, just having him up is sparking the rest of the team. But I think it remains to be seen if it was the right move, bringing him up so quickly, especially without, like you said, having a everyday spot for him somewhere. It's I don't know if we can expect him to play 5 or 6 games a week in right field right now. He does. I mean, just watching him out there, he's a large human being, a lot larger than you usually see in the outfield. Kind of looks like, well, Aaron Judge, who he might be compared to at the plate, but obviously Judge has a lot more experience out there. So in any case, I think uh, it remains to be seen if he can turn into that everyday player. But I agree. I think it would be better if he were playing first or DHing. If you were able to do that instead of learning a position and try to hit in the majors for the first time.
Well, and that's why I think, and yet kind of why I didn't understand why they optioned Blanco. Like I know why. Because, Cags is an outfielder. You were gonna send down another guy. But here's the issue I have with that. You're going to be bringing up a guy who's a rookie, who's played minimal outfield, who has minimal outfield experience. In the meantime, your other right fielder is another rookie who, by all accounts, performed admirably in the Detroit series, getting more hits than two or three of his other peers, that being John Rave, but still a rookie being your other right fielder. I didn't think if you were going to send someone down, it shouldn't have been Blanco. And I will admit sending Ray down would have been hard. Personally, I thought Massey was gonna get the boot.
Yeah, that's got to be coming at some point. Now, of course, like every time we say it's like, okay, it's finally time, no more. Well, then he gets the hit that sets up the game tying run in the ninth inning today in the first game. Now they ultimately lost it, so I don't know, but I
He's
mean,
still got the lowest OPS of any qualified hitter, if I'm not
yeah, I mean
mistaken.
and like I don't want to like even speak this into existence right now, but like MJ Melendez is actually starting to heat up a little bit in Omaha. We've seen resets work before. And, maybe you have to have M&M initials. It worked really well for Mike Moustakas. It might be working for MJ Melendez. So how about Michael Massey gets the M&M
Oh
rehab,
man.
gets the M&M rehab down in Omaha. And, I mean, I get why they don't want to give up on him. He's a second baseman that has shown above average power. That end of itself makes him kind of valuable. But I mean, you're not doing him any favors either by just like because they've eventually bowed to the inevitable. That they realize they can't just keep playing that sort of performance all the time. But like, what favors is it doing him to sit on the bench 3 days a week? Yeah, I mean,
Well,
like,
especially with the success that Lofton has had since coming up. I mean, he's been kind of a revelation as someone who can fill
I mean,
multiple infield positions.
the
I
guy's
think
got.
he's kind of a natural replacement there. I don't know who you'd bring up for Massey at this point, but
maybe Tolbert to get that base stealing role back
yeah.
that you lost with Blanco.
Yeah.
Because Blanco also, I see what you're saying about like just the tactical thing of wanting another outfielder on the roster. I'm not sure Blanco, speaking of like, are Reagans and Lugo really fully healthy yet and they're rushing them back? I don't know if they necessarily rushed Blanco back, but he just might not. He's also not that young. You got to remember, I think he's like 32, maybe even 33. Like he was a pretty old prospect when he came up, and I mean, he's got an Achilles issue. I feel like Achilles issue is just one of those things that you manage the pain and you play through it until it finally gives, and then you eventually are going to need surgery. I don't feel like you ever hear of Achilles issues that just go away. It's just one of those things that keeps just nagging and nagging and nagging until it finally blows. And so I wonder if he might just kind of be running on fumes at this point too. But I mean, yeah, Nick Lofton, what a like, it was kind of a weird thing because like when they first called Lofton up, it was when they sent Renfro down. And then a few days later, they called Rave up when they sent Biggio down, but they're kind of like flipped, right? Like Rave was kind of meant to fill Renfro's spot, at least until Caglione got here. And then Lofton is kind of like filling the Biggio role. And I mean, for me, that all kind of goes back to everything I just said there. It goes back to what we said and why I was started to get a little frustrated, and then they did it. But like about some of the lack of transactionality because the bar was set pretty low. And so, all this praise we're heaping on all these new guys, I think that's what it all really is reflective of is that like the bottom of the roster really could just be upgraded by addition by subtraction. It's good to see they've actually done that now. You guys what do you guys think this does? Let's wrap up with this because we've already gone a little over 30. What do we think they do? Like Q, if you remember back in our preseason podcast, I had we all had our three things that we really wanted to see. I wanted to see more internal transactionality, which started a tad slow. Melendez was kind of the first example that we might be seeing it, though. Then it really picked up in the last few weeks. And then, Wanted to see more hitting progress from the organization as a whole. That's very much a mixed bag. Outside of Caglione, it's been kind of dicey. And then I wanted to see Michael Garcia break out. We already kind of touched on that. I mean, nailed that one. He, as I say, he's been better than Bobby this year, if we're being honest, in some ways. What do you think this does to their trading outlook? Like I've always thought, going into the last couple weeks, I was thinking like, well, man, like I know this pitching is so good, but this offense has just got so many issues and the window's always open while Bobby and Jack are in their rookie contract stages. Is it really worth sacrificing talent of the future to win this year? But the Royals are kind of telling us their answer. Like they wouldn't have pushed the Jack envelope so strongly if they didn't feel this year was worth it. They could have just let Renfroe play out his contract. Like Lofton and Rave hadn't done anything in the majors to really push the issue. They did those things because they weren't going to, settle. So does this make you think they're going to be more aggressive? All this internal aggression that we've actually started to see, does that make you think they're going to be more aggressive externally, or do you think we might still be? I still have this feeling some people might be disappointed by what they do or maybe don't do trade wise.
Well, it's just, see, here's the thing. As of right now, look, if you were to ask me after the Detroit series what they needed to do before the Jack Caglione call-up, I would have told you they needed to be on the phone looking for an outfield bat, or they needed to find a they needed to find a guy who could hit consistently. And now but that was before they put up 23 in 3 games on the Cardinals. Now, I have to see what they do because the trade deadline isn't for what, another month?
Yeah, almost 2
so?
into July. So yeah.
Oh, yeah, geez, the end of July. So in essence, what we're gonna have to see is where this team's at and knock on wood, it doesn't happen. But you're also gonna have to see, what do your injuries look like? What does the IL look like? Who's still here? Who is still performing? Now, as of right now, the glaring issue is you don't really have anyone establishing second base on both sides of the field to play. On the one hand, I'll admit it, Jonathan India is not heating up at the plate, but he's hitting the ball, he's putting the ball into the outfield more, and he's getting on base. But he is shaky when he's playing defense. And maybe that's more attributed to the fact that he doesn't have a static position, but good lord, his second base outings especially have been bad. On the flip side, Michael Massey will play gold glove caliber defense at second base, but can't hit the side of a barn with one of those overly huge bats.
Couldn't hit water if he fell out of a boat. That's one I heard recently that I like.
Right. So really that part, because third base, Michael's good. Nothing really to say about Bobby. He's once he starts hitting a little bit more, because he will pick it back up again. He's not gonna stay in those figures. And Vinny's heating up too. So really the only issue, and Kyle Isbell's doing his thing, whoever they put in left field, I mean, Drew Waters is Drew Waters. He'll have Oso things at the plate, and he plays a pretty good outfield. So really, for me, if by the deadline we see Jack Caglione be that everyday player, the only hole I see is second base.
That's an interesting one. I think most people would expect him to target an outfielder, but those are probably, on the position player side of things, those are probably the most sought after because there's 3 different spots. So if you can, cobble together an outfield and Jack can be part of it in the short term, maybe they ought to target more of a utility guy, a guy that can play a better second, like you said, Ian, they're hit better than Massey, defend better than India. We've seen India DH a couple times in the last few games. He could do a lot worse there. If Jack can actually stick in right, at least for this season, then he can have Vinny at first and Salvi catch. And if he can get somebody to play second base. Now, I almost kind of wonder if that couldn't be Nick Lofton's role, that tweener role you're talking about, of like someone who doesn't have to be as good a hitter as India, but has to be a better defender, and then vice versa with Massey. I almost wonder if Lofton couldn't fill that role, but he probably is also going to have to be available to play third in the outfield as well. Hugh, what do you think about that? What do you think about his idea there that maybe you just try to do the piecemeal style out in the outfield, especially now if Jack is out there and you look kind of for just the best bat possible. What do you think about that? And just in general, what do you think does this aggression internally to you signal anything about what they might do externally?
Well, to their credit, as you mentioned, I've been very impressed with the moves they've made in the first couple months of the season, all of which were really leading up to the promotion of Jack. And I think a lot of what happens at the trade deadline actually does hinge on his performance. Because look, this team is pretty versatile when it comes to positions. I mean, you've got multiple guys who can move around, as we've discussed, outfield, infield. Maybe they're not gold glovers at any position, but you have options at different places. Now, if Jack is able to blossom into what we expect him to be, I honestly don't see a huge need to make a big splashy trade this year, because you have a lot of options. Ian made a good point about injuries. I think this team has actually been relatively healthy outside of a few pitchers. Like, our hitters have, by and large, not been injured at all, which is pretty incredible. So that remains to be seen, the health of the team as we enter July. But look, I mean, if Jack if he isn't able to turn into at least, a guy who can run into a couple homers a week and hit 200, draw a few walks, I mean, it doesn't do him any favors to make him the savior of this team. I do think it would be a good idea to look for an outfielder with some pop, because we don't really have that right now outside of hoping and praying that that's what Jack becomes. So that's
Well,
probably would be my main target, as we get closer to the deadline. But it is early. We've got a couple months, so there is just some wait and see there as well.
so it's funny you say that, because if we're talking about an outfielder with some pop, I already have a name on my radar, but it would be a heavy price to pay. And the guy I'm looking at is Jesus Sanchez from the Marlins.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've seen that name pushed around. I kind of wonder if a guy like I think some of those guys who are kind of those five tools, a bit of a stretch, because like five tool generally implies like a player with just elite tools across the board, like Bobby, but like Sanchez kind of falls into the category that like I guess ideally maybe Drew Waters would, where you know he's kind of a 50 player. Like Q, you'll relate to that in the OTP games. We used to have those guys that like now on the super teams we ended up building. They would a lot of times be bench players, but we call them 50 guys because like nothing really stands out about them, but they don't really have any glaring weaknesses. I feel like those might be, I won't say buy lows, because at the trade deadline usually nothing is cheap. Like there's a trade deadline tax, I think, because of desperation that teams get. It all depends on the market too, but
Yeah.
there's a I think there's an underappreciation, or maybe Drew Waters is an okay example. If you want an example that you might remember from like your childhood or however, whenever that was for you, depending on how old you are, I always like to compare guys like that to like David DeJesus because I feel like that's a guy who get really underappreciated because he was on such bad teams and because, he didn't have any elite skills. Like he wasn't he wasn't a batting title level hitter, but he always hit for a decent average with some OBP skills. He didn't have typical outfielder power, but he always had 10 to 18 home runs. He didn't have a rocket arm, but he always had a few outfield assists. He didn't make highlight reel catches, but he always made the catches you were supposed to. They're kind of 50 guys, 50 being like major league average on the 20 to 80 scouting scale.
Yeah.
I feel like there's an underappreciation for a lot of those guys. And sometimes you might get a guy who sneakily puts up a lot of value for a decent deal.
Right. And another guy, not a Royal, but I think another guy that's like that. If you remember a guy named Delino DeShields from those old Rangers teams.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
his son was in the majors a few years ago, even Delano DeShields Jr. I remember. I was too young to have watched senior in his day, but I know how he was a borderline Hall of Famer. So
right. But here's the thing: I put out Sanchez because Quentin, he said an outfielder with some power. Sanchez has got power. That's why I put him out there. Now, if you want someone who doesn't have power but can consistently hit, I mean, obviously let's be honest. The biggest trade target is going to be Cedric Mullins from the Orioles, and probably the guy playing to his left, that being Ryan O'Hearn. He's getting traded to someone who needs an outfielder too.
Just twist the dagger for us Royals fans if the Royals give up prospects for Ryan O'Hearn after. I remember all those conversations that Quentin and I and Kyle would have. This was pre-podcast days. But every time O'Hearn just flails away at the plate, Kyle's just like it's kind of was like the MJ Melendez vibes we got earlier this year, where it's just like eventually you have to just like acknowledge reality and say like, look, this ain't working. But like I have the same fear with MJ Melendez that like some other team is either gonna make him fit in their ballpark like the Orioles did with O'Hearn, or like doesn't it just seem like the most Royals thing that would happen? We're talking about a team that's turned it around the last couple of years, but we still got a lot of PTSD here. And I just have this thing that MJ Melendez, especially if he doesn't like the world on fire in Omaha, they might just non-tender him. And before we know it, he's signed with the Yankees, and maybe he's their fourth outfielder. Maybe he's only a bench bat, but he's, you look up at the halfway point of the season, he's got 8 pinch hit home runs. It's just, oh God, Ryan O'Hearn's been talked about as a trade target for the Royals, and I'm just like, I mean, if he came here and hit and helped the team win playoff games, who cares? But boy, that would just be twisting the dagger to give up prospects for him now.
I mean, it's just
about Brent Rooker.
God, I don't even want. That's the one I won't talk about that one because that one just breaks my heart. They literally traded for him. They gave up a nobody for him in 23 in the terrible year, and then just kind of like, I get it. Kind of like guys get caught up in the roster shuffle, and they traded for a ton of dudes that year. But man, there was a lot of people saying, I remember back at the end of 23, like, because if you remember, Nelson Velasquez got crazy hot at the end of that year when, nobody was watching because it was the end of 2023 when they lost 106 games, but he had like 14 home runs in like 2 months. And everybody was like, you know what? Brent Rooker might be a better player, though. But of course, the Royals couldn't let Velasquez go, so they had to let Rooker go instead.
Right. Well, I mean, and that's the that's the danger of it. I mean, you had 2 guys who were, who you had 2 options. You go with one, you may miss out on the other. Now, granted, here's the thing though. Brent Rooker, while it's a heartbreaker, isn't really, I don't honest, but Brent Rooker's situation doesn't really bother me, only because we weren't the only team that gave up on him. The Padres.
That's very true.
The Padres. Imagine an improved Brent Rooker in this Padres lineup right now.
Where would he even play? So I don't even.
Right.
They got hitters coming. Gosh, like saying the Padres, I think I'll make this point and then we're going to get off here. We're running over. But, you bring up the Padres. That makes me think, too, of like, remember when the Twins and Marlins, because you got to remember I think this would have been before 23, right? Because he spent 23 in Miami. So remember, Luis Ariz originally came up with the Twins, kind of the today's Tony Gwynn, your slap hitter specialist, your batting average guru.
Yep.
And he came up with the Twins, was, established himself there. Then they traded him for Pablo Lopez, who's now their best starting pitcher. And, the Marlins thought they were going to be good that year. They weren't. So he spent a year there. And then, like, early last year, like last May, the Marlins flipped into the Padres. And, he's a free agent after next year. And guys like him who, guys with one elite skill just don't tend to age so well. Like he doesn't have much power. He's not really a great defender anywhere, you know, and I feel like guys like him get shipped around a lot because they're kind of hired guns. The Royals were in on him last year, and the Padres just beat the offer. The Padres are contender to contender trades are weird, and I don't know what the Padres pitching situation is, but I mean, I don't know. If you're gonna give up real talent, I almost might prefer to like give up an extra prospect and get a guy with some established elite skills there. What do you guys think about that? Like, I almost would prefer if they're gonna make a substantive trade to try to upgrade this year's team, I'd rather it be, you know, like if you're already gonna have to trade, I don't know, who's Luwinder Avila or I'm assuming Cameron isn't really considered a trade chip at this point because he's too valuable to the major league team. But if you're going to trade somebody like that for a rental like Cedric Mullins, why not just like throw Blake Mitchell in there and get an elite hitter? You know what I mean? Like if you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound. And like this team, I think needs more than just a marginal upgrade. Like they need a really good hitter. They need a guy to put at the top or in the middle of the lineup. So I wonder if that might be an avenue worth pursuing there also.
Well, I do agree. Luis Ariz, just purely for the fact that he can hit the ball and make contact for bat. Because really, that's what's okay. I think the power will sort itself out. But right now, we just have until this series an average problem. Guys who we don't have that guy who's a sure hit.
Well, and a situational problem more than anything.
Yes, right.
Like because like batting average, they're top 10 in the league, but then batting average with runners in scoring position, they're bottom 5.
Right. So with a rise, you would be getting that. It would cost you a pretty hefty price. I would be, you'd have to have a headliner for a hook, but you also now the thing is, I don't know what's the most depleted in the Padres farm system because we all know that they have depleted their farm system in the pursuit of a championship.
Yep.
Right. So I'd have to see where they're low at and then focus on that. Probably whatever position they're the most empty at, that would be the headliner. If it's catcher, it would be a Blake Mitchell. If it's if it's an outfielder, I don't know.
You'd have to hope they also liked Gavin Cross in the 22 draft and think they can fix him because right now he's kind of flailing. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there would be the prospect match. I mean, your point is valid. Like you would need the needs to match up. Like you would need the Padres to have enough faith in the rest of their offense because that's the thing is they're not really selling if they trade you a Luis Ariz. They're restocking their farm system and they're having faith that their offense will continue to keep doing its thing, which they probably have enough hitters for it to be fine. But then, yeah, you need the prospects to line up there. Q, what do you think about that general philosophy though? Before we get off here, do you like the idea that like because I feel like there's a lot of those tweener guys that could be good on any given. Like, I guess my thing is like now over his whole career, or if they were signing him in free agency, yes. Like, if they signed him in free agency, I'm not going to say, well, but Drew Waters has been about as good as Cedric Mullins this year. That wouldn't be the thought process. But when you're trading for a guy to help you right away, sometimes I feel like you could get into a situation like they even got into that a little bit last year with like Paul DeJong. Like we were all so psyched when Paul DeJong came here because he was hot when they traded for him, and he was hot for the first week after they got him. He hit like 4 homers in a week, and then he kind of disappeared. So I feel like you could sometimes get in those situations where you trade for marginal players because you only want to give up marginal returns, and then all you do is kind of muddy up the waters. I almost think if they are gonna be just as aggressive externally as they have been internally, it might be time to make a trade that hurts and get a new. Lisa Rice was just a name, but what do you think, Q? I think if you're gonna make a trade like that, you might as well, do something that changes the actual complexion of the team instead of just getting another warm body in there, because they've shown to their credit this year that they have more depth than last year. It's just you're trying to get above a certain bar of performance.
So, AQ, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I want to make this quick point though. Sometimes you have to go for that. I will say, like last year when we traded for Hunter Harvey, when Harvey went down, just out of curiosity, I went to look at the guy we traded, Caden Wallace. He is having an awful year in Double A. So I'm not. So really, the trade right now, there's no winner for it. But I'm not
Right. Yep.
upset that we traded him.
Right. Yeah. No, yeah. It's more just about like, I'm worried that if they trade for somebody like Cedric Mullins, like again, over a full season or over a whole contract, yes, he would be better than Drew Waters. But you know what I'm saying? Like they're trimming some of the fat off the roster already. And so now I think if you're going to be aggressive, continue to be aggressive and make a trade like that, I feel like it might behold you more to go for a real needle mover, even if it's a trade that hurts a little bit in terms of what you got to give up. What do you think?
Well, obviously, it worked out pretty well in 2015 for that team to make a trade that hurts. I think that's a fair point. Is trading for a mid-level outfielder who hits 20 to 25 home runs a year going to move the needle enough to make you a true contender? Probably not. Do we have the depth right now where I would be comfortable making a major move like that? I think with the pieces that we currently have, could make sense. Our farm system isn't great as is, but the window is wide open right now. I mean, really, as long as you have Bobby under contract, which we do until his opt out after 2030. But he's in his prime right now. He's probably not going to be better in the future than he is right now, and it's hard to imagine this pitching staff performing much better in the coming years than it is right now
How
as
much better
well.
can they get? Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. So
And
I definitely take your point. I would support if a guy is out there for the right price. I would be okay giving up some of your major pieces, especially with this success that the guys in the majors are having right now. I mean, you don't really need those prospects in the short term. What you need is somebody who can protect Bobby and drive in runs. I
right.
think we're starting to see the hitting come around a bit just as a whole. I think there has been some bad luck factored in there. There's no doubt with, our batting average has not been bad, but we're just not hitting with runners in scoring position. I tend to think that is more of a fluky thing. Just that's my philosophy.
Well, I mean, we know it's
I
a
don't
fluky
think that's
thing
the
because they
skill
were.
to hit with runners in scoring position.
Well, it's not
I
because
think it's just
they didn't go from best in the league at it last year to worst in the league at it this year with the same guys. That doesn't make any sense. So that's proof that it's
right. So that will take care of itself. What won't take care of itself without making a change is being last in the league in home runs. That is going to have to change if they want to make a serious run to the playoffs and beyond.
So, one thing, and this is my last point, one thing I always go back to, and it's the only one I go back to because it was the most impactful. Different set of circumstances. I go back to 2015, but they were the best team in the league by a country mile by that point. But when they went after Zobrist and when they went after Cueto, they gave up those prospects and they were comfortable doing it. Number one, in the position they were in, but number two, they gave them up because those two players were guys that they knew were reliable. Like, if you were to go back and say, okay, who are the top trade targets for a utility man and a starting pitcher, those would be them. It's just this year, I am having a hard, other than Jesus Sanchez for an outfield spot and Cedric Mullins, I am having a rough time trying to find anybody in the league. And throw in Luis Arise. So 3 guys are certainties. Other than that, I couldn't tell you who I'd want to say, yes, we will give up some of our best prospects for this guy.
It's a good point. I mean, yeah, you gotta, especially if they're rentals, right? Like, because that's another thing. But beyond, like, there's a limited amount of impact they can make, but you know, it puts so much pressure on the immediacy, and like those guys have to come, and they don't have an adjustment period. Like they gotta start hitting right away. So absolutely, Ian, great stuff, man. Feel free to hop in any Twitter space in the future. You know, if it's a more, if it's a more set, scheduled pod, we may or may not be able to get guests on all the time, but appreciate you listening, man, and feel free to chat anytime.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Q, let's get Kyle on. We got some Chiefs to talk in the next few days. Sound good? He won't. Well, to be fair, he doesn't have hardly any presence on Twitter, so it would look like we were talking to a bot. But we're gonna have to give Kyle all kinds of hell for not joining us live. He just won't do it. So we're gonna have to get him on the pre-recorded pods. But I think we got to talk Chiefs in the next few days. What do you think?
I think it's about that time. Sounds good.
We just had
Good to meet you, Ian.
OTAs.
Thanks for joining us.
We appreciate you joining us, and stay tuned to the Calling It How I See It Sports